So my wife and I use summer as an opportunity to explore sabbaticals and to travel to places to determine whether we might want to, live there, move there at some point. I also used it as an opportunity to look for other jobs that I enjoyed that were education adjacent.
Welcome to the Teacher Money Show, the podcast dedicated to helping teachers navigate your unique financial challenges and unlock your financial superpowers. I'm your host, Shaun Morgan, a full-time teacher. That's right, I teach every day just like you, and personal financial coach. And I'm here to help every teacher, whether you're a seasoned teacher looking for fresh insights or a new educator navigating your first paycheck, to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life. The contents of this podcast are informational in nature and are not legal or tax advice, and neither I nor my guests are engaged in the provision of legal, tax, or any other advice. You should not act upon this information without first seeking appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional. I'm super excited to talk to Eric Creeger today about his journey in personal finance. Eric was a teacher. He has since retired and is now doing consulting work in education. But most importantly, he started his personal finance journey late, but was still able to retire before the age of 50. So we're going to talk about how he's able to accelerate his retirement journey with good financial principles and help those who may feel like they've missed the boat realize that it's never too late to catch the boat. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shaun. I'm very excited to be here and to talk to you.
I am excited too. This is going to be so much fun. So I know a little bit about your journey in education, but let's just hear about this career that you had in education and how you got to where you are.
So I live in the North Texas area, Dallas area. I started teaching way back in 1995. I taught history, coached basketball, taught English, a little bit of reading. Eventually moved into different roles as an instructional coach, an assistant principal for a while. My last W-2 job was as a university professor, a senior lecturer in the University of North Texas system. So I recently retired from that and doing some consulting, as you mentioned, and it's been quite a journey.
So how many years were you in education then?
So according to TRS, I've been years, 24 years that are creditable for pension purposes, but I've been in education since I graduated from college in 1995.
Awesome. That is incredible. So you are obviously interested in personal finance. Not every teacher gets that place. And how did you get your interest in personal finance? Where did that light bulb moment come from?
Well, I think my background's fairly typical. I came from a lower middle class family. It was that kind of typical schizophrenic kind of shift between we're going to save, we're going to spend, we're going to save, we're going to spend. But I never really got any education in what to do once you do save. So there was no conversation about investing or principles of long-term planning, really. Um, my first marriage, I made every mistake you could possibly make. Everything you hear teachers do. We were two teachers on teacher salary, and we built a house from scratch, and we bought custom furniture and new cars. And even when I tried to do things right, I made typical mistakes. I said, "Oh, I need to invest. I'm going to buy this tax sheltered annuity that they're selling in the teachers lounge." And I did all kinds of things that I thought were in my best interest, but ultimately were not.
So, you were making these mistakes. When did the light bulb come on for you to understand this is the right way to go?
So after that marriage ended, I was starting over in debt, obviously, at age 30, and I thought to myself, "This is crazy that I have nothing to show for my life up to this point. I'm going through like my first decade as an adult, and I'm below water, below the surface." So I decided that I wanted to be much more intentional about my life, specifically about the personal finance portion. So I spent an entire summer reading everything I could find. Just went out to the pool in my sad bachelor apartment and said, I'm gonna do things differently from this point forward. And I went through personal finance libraries and read and learned everything I could. And from that point forward, I've tried to be much more intentional about what I do with my spending and what I do with my saving and investing.
Yeah, I love it. So you started around age 30. You were able to retire by age 50. Uh, what did you do to reach that goal? How are you able to position yourself to get retirable income after 20 years on a teacher's salary?
Well, the big thing is that, first I just want to say it wasn't a sprint all the way through. One of the things that I think is important to understand about money is that it allows you options and choices. So as I went through my career, the fact that I was being intentional about my money making decisions and I created a gap between the amount of money that I was making and the amount I was spending gave me some flexibility to try new things, to experiment, to drop out of the classroom and experiment with being a coach or working as a private consultant or doing other things. So um, there are certainly stories in the fire community about people who have accelerated and gotten to retirement much faster than 20 years. Typically, those are outside of education because, as you know, in education, we just have less margin for error because our salaries are proportionally lower. So in the second half of my life, that I would say that the big things that I did right were I planned for what I was doing with my money. I made much better decisions in my second marriage. So we were a dual income, still teachers, but we were dual income, but aligned goals. So we made some decisions about how we wanted to live our lives and how to avoid lifestyle inflation. So we're still living in the same house that we purchased when we were just married. We buy cars and drive them forever, and we are very purposeful in the way in which we spend money.
Yeah, I love it. So for your retirement, you're still kind of working though, but like what is your current plan? Are you using the just the income from your current work as a consultant to hold you up in your retirement from education? Or what kind of vehicles have you used to pad yourself and prepare for that retirement?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. What actually is retirement? I do consider myself financially independent. I don't have to work anymore, but I choose to because I found some things that I enjoy doing. When you look at kind of the whole gamut of the types of financial independence, from fat fi and having as much money to do whatever you want, to lean fi, to barista fi, where you're gonna just have a part-time job and make coffee or work at Home Depot or whatever else. What I've decided to do is kind of a phase fi, where over time I have removed the portions of my job that I don't enjoy so that I can focus on the parts that I do, even if that means that I'm going to make less money. So I mentioned that after I worked for a while, I left the classroom and was an instructional coach, which was still a teacher salary. Then I tried being an assistant principal for a little while, and it was good work, and I enjoyed portions of it, but there were portions I did not like. I didn't like the fact that all of my time was focusing on the problem children and the problem adults. So I decided that I wanted to remove that aspect, but I wanted to go back in the classroom and keep working with adults. So I went back and taught at the college level. So it was still a teacher salary. So it was a drop from administration pay, but I was much happier doing it, and that's what the flexibility of having outside savings and that FU money allowed me to do.
So without using the word, can you just tell the listeners what FU money is? I haven't used that term yet on this show, I don't think.
So it means that you have enough money that when someone asks you to do something you don't want to do, you can say, "Well, forget you. I don't really want to do that right now." It gives you the freedom and the flexibility to take a sabbatical, to look for another job, even if it means you're going to be out of work for a while. So it gave my wife and I the freedom to say, you know what, I don't think I like the direction of this district, so I'm going to go look for a position in another district. Or, I want to try teaching online and working from home. Or she opened a tutoring business for a while, and she worked from home doing that for a year or two. So we tried a bunch of different things, and it was nice to have that freedom and not be trapped in the system where we had to live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely, this is one of the most important concepts, I think, especially as teachers, because there's so many things being piled on teachers, right? The number one reason that teachers are walking away from the classroom is the unrealistic expectations being placed upon teachers. You have to do this and this and this and this and this. And, honestly, if enough teachers said, no, they'd have to find some other way to make it happen, right? And the reason we don't say no is because we need our job to pay our bills. But if we had the money to say, I'm not going to do that. What are you going to do? Fire me? Right? Like, I'll find another, there's so many like teaching jobs out there. I'll just find another teaching job. Right. And I can, subsist until I get to that spot. Right. That is what gives you the confidence to say, I'm not going to do this thing that you are trying to force down my throat that I know is not good for me. It's not going to be good for my students. And it's just trying to check a box that you have for me. Right. And obviously, if there's something that they want you to do that's going to be, good for your students, because they're going to really help them succeed, you want to do that. But when it's just another program or another responsibility that they're trying to put you on you without additional pay, right? You can just be like, Sorry, I don't have the time for that, nor do I have the will to do what you are trying to force me to do. So I think that having that money built up is really really key. Now, when you had this money built up, was that stuck in investments, or was it just like in a high yield savings account? Where did you have that money to have that confidence to be able to walk away and try these different things?
I think you make a good point, Sean. I think the reality is that public education floats along on a sea of unpaid labor, and schools could not function without all the things that teachers and other staff members do without compensation. And I'm not saying those are bad things. Some of my most rewarding experiences in education were things that I either wasn't paid for or wasn't paid adequately for. You know, when I look at the hourly rate that I received when I was coaching basketball, for example, it's a little embarrassing to think that I was working for that small amount of money. But you know, we do it not because of the compensation, but because of the kids and the relationships with them, and the calling that we have for improving their lives. So I'm certainly not advocating that people don't do that. But what I do think is it's important for us to have the freedom to exit if a situation becomes toxic. Because even when you work in a great system and a great school, it only takes a couple of changes, either, you know, legislative changes or leadership changes or cultural changes, where that might not be the same setting anymore. And it's nice to have options. And too many of my friends that are teachers just don't. They could not go a month without a paycheck because of the way that they've structured their lives. So, your specific question, things that I've done to do that. The first thing was, of course, growing the gap between our income and our expenses. So we did that in a couple ways. I mentioned earlier that my wife was also a teacher, and we had friends who were teachers and single parents, and they were able to make things work. So we thought, well, if they can do it on one salary, why can't we do it on two? So we tried to live on what we called one plus. So we would live on one salary plus a little bit extra, so we could do some extra things otherwise. We also each did a variety of different side hustles to raise our income. Sometimes they were small things. You know, I was a proctor for the SAT and for the Texas certification exams, and you know those types of extra things on campus. I mentioned that I did some coaching, but the return for that monetarily is relatively low, so I don't even really like to count that. And then over time, I started to do some consulting on educational topics outside of school. So all those things were things that we did outside of school to raise our income to give us a little bit more flexibility with what we did. Um, yeah,
Where did you put that money to make sure it was ready to hold on to if you needed it?
perfect. Yeah, sorry, thank you. I'm not a huge I'm not a huge proponent in trusting in the teacher pension system to be your sole support. Too many people that I know believe that that is this panacea that is going to solve all their problems. Um, there's a couple of issues with it. Number one, it requires you to hang on until you reach your certain magic number and then you can retire. When I was a new teacher, I had a guy across the hall from me. He was an older man, and he kind of became my anti-example, the person I didn't want to be. He was hanging on because he had to qualify for his pension, and he didn't know what else to do with his life, and he was just going to stick around until he could get that. And you know, his last couple of years, he was miserable. His kids were miserable. He was not enjoying it. He was not a good teacher, but he didn't have any choices, and I never wanted to be that person. The other reason why I'm a little reluctant to rely on pensions is, you know, I live in Texas, and you know, as a Republican state, there's not a lot of support for cost of living adjustments in pensions. So I knew people who were like master teachers when I started out that had full pensions, 100% of their salary, because they taught forever and ever, and they retired and they thought they were set for life. But you know, when I started teaching in 1995, my 100% salary was $25,000. So these master teachers that were retiring, making a little more than that, maybe they're making $30,000. That pension probably sounded great then, but 30 years later, the corrosive power of inflation has really worn away with that, and with no cost of living adjustments, they're really they're not living their best life. And I did not want to rely upon the legislature to take care of me as I aged. So to say all of that, it became important on me once I did my financial research around age 30 that I needed to save outside of the pension and do other things. So we've saved in a variety of buckets. Um, I believe that although there are some tax advantages in 403Bs and 457s, for most teachers, I don't think that should be the primary bucket. You know, our salaries are already relatively low. So the tax savings and the tax advantages that we get from those may not be worth the cost, particularly if you're planning on retiring early like I was. So we prioritized our Roth IRAs first, and then saving in regular taxable brokerage accounts. And then after that, if we had money left, and some years we did, and some years we didn't, then we would look at 403(b)s and 457s as appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's so important because like the tax advantage is so small when you're in those lower tax brackets, right? I mean, like the tax brackets don't start getting bigger until like over $100,000. 150, I think, is where it is, where it really starts to, like, ramp up. So the amount of money that you're saving, especially considering that it's, you've already got all this other stuff, like your insurance is coming out. For most districts, you have insurance coming out now, and you have, you know, uh, these other, taxes coming out that are just completely involuntary. Then your pension's already coming out. I the first year that I taught, I was like, oh, this is how much money I'm going to take home, right? It was like $3,000 is what I was thinking. And I think it's like 35, actually. $3,500 a month is what I'll take home. And then when my paycheck hit for the first time, I was like, where did half of that go? Right. It's just like so much of it was just like, my insurance is gone, my pension is gone, the taxes that are coming are gone. And I was down to a fraction of what I was expecting to have. And then because of my gross income, I'd qualified for, a bigger loan than I should have gotten for a house. I didn't get my maximum qualification. I got a bit under that, but still even a bit under that, like half of my income was going towards my house payment. And it was just a terrible situation to start off my career because I was completely ignorant of how to, figure out what my actual take-home pay was going to be. But having that, once you've built up that gap, as you were talking about, you don't want to destroy that gap entirely by just, I'm going to get these tax advantages for just such a small amount, right? Because you'll get the other opposite tax advantage when you put the money in the Roth, right? When you pull it out later, you'll be able to get that money tax free. So if you are just able to put, that money in and have that then be more accessible, because the money you put into the Roth, not the growth, but the money you put into the Roth is still accessible to you. If you need to step away from teaching, it's a very, very powerful tool for that reason.
And I have friends who argue that it is their emergency fund for that reason, because they can pull out the initial contributions. I don't necessarily buy into that, but I can certainly understand the logic behind it.
Yeah, I can see like having like, like a smaller in your bank account emergency fund. And then like, okay, I have a bit more that like I'm going to count as my emergency fund in your Roth, but you definitely need to have some of that, more liquid, more stable on hand. It just depends on your situation, how risky you feel like being, right? Because your risk tolerance does make a huge difference in your investment approach. But yeah, definitely, definitely don't have zero in the bank account, because if the the downturn in the economy is what's causing your emergency, then you have, even though you put in a certain amount of money, the value is still going to drop drastically, and that's not going to feel very good when you have to pull that money out for your emergencies.
And right now, education labor is at an advantage. There's a very shallow talent pool out there. As a former administrator and someone who works with schools around the country, I know that there are lots of schools that are desperate to hire. So uh, our skills as teachers are pretty portable. Like I don't worry as much. Like if I needed to go get a job as a teacher, I could do that without really too much difficulty. But it hasn't always been that way. And there have been times when the labor market has been flooded and it's been a lot harder to get teacher jobs. So I think that has to factor into your considerations on risk as well.
No, I think that's really important. I had a friend who lost his job for the dumbest reason, like just like a parent complaint, basically, and he was out, and he's like, that should not have been the thing, and I agreed with him. But there's like some other situations happening in other districts nearby that the school is very sensitive to the situation. And like it was like in January, and you're like, how are you going to get a job in January? Well, within a couple of weeks, he was able to get another job. I mean,
Right.
it was in the next town over, but he was able to get a job there. His son was already living over there, so he was able to just move in with his son and start working. Like it was super fast. So I mean, like teachers are desperately needed. Even a teacher who lost his job for a situation that you'd be like, oh, maybe everyone would be like, nope, not going to hire you again. A couple of weeks, he got a new job. And like I said, he's a great guy. He deserved to get a new job. But I'm just saying, like, there's so much out there that you shouldn't feel like you have to be stuck at a school that's toxic or a district that is toxic, that is destroying your joy in the classroom and just asking way too much from you.
To do that, though, we have to be willing to take advantage of the geographic arbitrage and actually move. There's a lot of people who are trapped, and there's one school system and maybe one charter school and one private school in their community. And if they're not willing to leave that community, then those are their choices. But yeah, if you're willing to make small changes, I know you live in Lubbock and you teach online, but I know if you were willing to drive 2 hours and go across the border into New Mexico, some of the oil-rich districts right there are paying 30,000 over what Texas teachers are making. It's amazing the difference in a relatively small, geographic change.
Yeah, I mean, you can do very, very small moves can make a big difference. Even in Lubbock, right? We have a small district in like a small town, because most of the towns have their own district, right? And they're paying, the Texas base. Then you go into Lubbock, the Lubbock, main school district, and they just have so much more funding. You could get a $20,000 increase by just moving into town with your job. Now, of course, there are different challenges with teaching in the city versus teaching in those rural districts, but you have to just be aware that where you get a job and the amount that you're making versus where you're living and how that cost factors in can make a huge difference in your ability to make that spread that you were talking about, right? You
Sure.
can't be married to the place that you are at if it's paying you low, cost of living is high, and you want to have that spread between your income and your expenses, right? There's something that's got to give. And if you're not willing to move, then your ability to make that spread is what's going to be the thing that gives.
Right.
All right. I love that you were able to step away from the classroom at age 50. Like you had the ability to be completely financially independent, but you decided to continue working because I think the number one problem with retirement is it's boring and there's no drive behind you. There's no thing getting you up. There's no like thing motivating you, and people tend to die as a result. They don't have anything that they're doing. So if you're trying to leave education, maybe because you're feeling like you're going to burn out, there needs to be something that you're going toward. How did you choose this next step, this consulting thing, and how did you get into that?
So one of the things I think is really interesting about teaching as a career is that you have options during your regular working career to explore different things. So my wife and I use summer as an opportunity to explore sabbaticals and to travel to places to determine whether we might want to, live there, move there at some point. I also used it as an opportunity to look for other jobs that I enjoyed that were education adjacent. So, I talked earlier about like baristify. I'm not really interested in leaving a full-time career and then signing up for another 9 to 5 job at a drastically lower salary with no pension benefits, et cetera. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I don't also want to just give up the skills and knowledge that I've gained throughout a career. So as I've tried to kind of peel away the parts of my job I don't enjoy to do just the parts that I do, it's been kind of a gradual process. When I left administration and went back in the classroom, uh, and taught adults, then it gave me the chance to work with adults that were not necessarily in trauma, that were trying to learn something new. So that was great. It gave me a chance to actually practice the art and craft of teaching, which I miss. But at the college level, it also involved a lot of bureaucracy and committee work and a lot of things that I didn't enjoy there. So the shift to consulting allows me just to work with adults who want to learn things without having to do all of the follow up and the day-to-day details. I can work with the district and give them some ideas, and I can do some PD, and then I can come back in 6 weeks and do some follow up without having to deal with the discipline issues and the staffing turnover and all those types of things. So it has been, I think, just the next layer of my journey as far as focusing on the things that I enjoy, the things that I'm good at, without the things that are more of a burden as far as a job. And the pay drops a little bit, but I'm doing something I love, so it's not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to have once again that money on hand to be able to make that decision and not be that negative example across the hallway that you're talking about, the guy who's just holding on because he can't do anything else. It's just so sad to me that there are teachers who are doing that. Just 2 more years and I can retire because I've got my pension. If you are counting down that much every time I talk to you, yikes. Okay, that's not where we all want to be. We want to be in the
Yeah.
classroom because we love it. We don't want to be in the classroom because we need just to clock in, clock out, to get our time to get to retirement.
When as someone who's been in a lot of classrooms as a coach and as an administrator now as a consultant, if you think that your students aren't aware of you counting down like that, then you're crazy because they're very much aware of the short timers and the people who are just putting in their days. And that's a little sad. Teaching is not an easy job and it deserves our full energy and attention. And I just never wanted to be in a position where I couldn't give that. I didn't want to be that person.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just it's where teaching is a job that requires passion. You cannot be an effective teacher without passion. You can be an effective accountant without passion. You don't need a passion to do some numbers. You're going to hate your life, but you can be effective. Teaching, you must have that passion so you can make that connection, that real life relationship connection with your students to make a difference in their lives, because that is what matters. And if you have lost that, then let's get you the financial wherewithal to be able to move on to something else, to try a different, whether it's education adjacent or just a new frontier in education, however you want to go about it, or moving on to something else entirely, just as long as you are no longer not dragging down your students with your lost passion. So I think that is, for me, that's a driving force of why we should be looking for this financial stability, to be able to have that financial independence, to be able to then do what we want. And speaking of a why, was there something that was really driving you towards this retirement at 50, or was it just this like changes in your career as you were going, or like did you have like some driving force saying like this is why I want to get to where I'm at right
So when I first made the changes in my life, it was is really just to make my life better. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have money stress. I wanted to make sure that I had options in my career. But about 2015, I came across the fire movement and started like reading some of the official stuff and learning that there was a purpose to just other than just saving and having options. There was a purpose to doing it, and that there was a more organized movement about ways to actually retire early and then what to do once you do that. So that actually accelerated my journey a little bit. It gave me a little more intentionality behind the side hustles that I was doing. It gave me a goal to push towards. I had a dollar amount that I wanted to reach by a certain age, and it was, I think, probably a focusing point for me. So, from that point forward, my wife and I we were moving towards that with purpose.
now? Yeah, no, that's great. Having a goal of where you're going is really, really important. Having a number, like this is what I need to reach. And the great thing about teachers is we have so many different buckets that we can fill and use to reach whatever our number goal is. So just remembering that, if you were a regular Joe with a 401k, whatever that number is, that's you're putting in basically that entire number, right? But with the teacher, you've got the pension going on, and then we've got other benefits. Like a lot of pension systems have like healthcare provided when you get into the pension. So like there's that thing that's not as much of a stress on top of you, and other people are going to have to pay for that if they retire early. And then there's just like a lot of other buckets we have, the 403b, the 457, HSAs, IRAs that we can use strategically to grow to a certain point to be able to do whatever it is that we want, whether that is moving on to a new career in education or taking your skill and doing something just fun, right? As a history teacher, I think like how fun would it be to go somewhere and do, history tours of these places that I love so much. Or, as a math teacher, maybe you're fired up about a certain area of mathematics and you want to grow into that. Or I know a math teacher who is now doing like math workshops to help people with their math skills. Or like English teachers can get into novel writing, or there's all sorts of things that we have, these passions that led us to these certain areas to teach, that if when we have that financial independence, that can be the next thing we move to. We can have a passion project past our teaching that is something that can really fire us up.
Absolutely.
All right, Eric, this has been a great conversation. I have just a couple more questions for you. First, what is your number one tip? for teachers to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life?
I think the one advantage we have as teachers is that we have, well, a couple of things. Number one, because we are teachers, by definition, we know about education. So we should be able to educate ourselves. So I think that would probably be the first tip, is to educate yourself as to what your options are. We should not rely upon the system to take care of us. We should not trust that things will just work out all right. We should do the work to learn about things that honestly we know are not taught in schools, and we have to educate ourselves about. And that's why I'm glad to see podcasts like yours out there. And it's become, I think, a lot easier for this next generation of teachers to learn these things than it was, even 10, 20 years ago. So excited about that. The other thing I think I would tell teachers to do is to take advantage of their flexible schedule to do things, to experiment, to try things. Don't just vegetate for the summer. Use it to make extra money, use it to travel, use it to try out different things that you might want to do outside of education or after you leave the classroom. Because those are advantages that my friends in other career fields don't have. For them, it's just like an endless slog until they get their 2-week vacation, and then they just are right back in it. So I think that's something that some teachers do not take as much advantage of as they should.
I 100% agree on that. People say like, oh, you need that whole summer to recuperate. No, you need a little bit to recuperate. If you need the whole summer to recuperate, you might want to reconsider the way that you're running your classroom. I think that there's something else going on, that if you're taking 2 months of watching Netflix to recuperate, especially if you're like in debt, summer, that's the time to hustle, right? If you have a goal you're reaching for, like buying a car, or putting a down payment on a house, or you're just trying to accelerate that movement towards retirement, summer is the time to take advantage of that. And then I love this mini sabbatical idea that you're having, where like, what if I moved somewhere? Well, try it. You have a summer, right? You can even do something crazy like put your house on Airbnb while you're gone, right? And you have that time off from work to try things, right? Well, what if I became a novelist, like we were talking about? Well, try being a novelist over the summer. Lock yourself in your room for 8 hours a day and just write, because that's what all these crazy novelists do, right? And see how much you really like the life that you are aspiring towards. It's something that so many people really wish that they had, that we fortunately get the opportunity to take advantage of. Because remember, while you might be getting paid over the summer, that money is being stretched from the 10 months you're working. You are not being paid for your summertime, which is part of the reason why we have a lower salary. So don't spend all your summer working as if you are teaching. Don't spend all your summer being like, oh, I need to prepare all these things. Just find a way to change your in the school year time to be able to handle most of that. I mean, yes, it'll take some preparation in the summer, but use that summer for yourself, for your own personal development, for your own work, for your own life, because that's what the power of teaching has. That's one of our superpowers, is having that summer to explore life.
And I'm not naive. Over the course of my career, I've seen summers shrink. They have contracted, from almost 3 full months to, some districts it's 5 or 6 weeks really. It's all you get before you have feedback for staff development, all those types of things. So it's tougher to go out and get a traditional job for that time, or to do a lot of crazy things. But we do have flexibility both in the summer and throughout the school year. So finding creative ways to take advantage of that. We've done a lot of travel hacking to pay for our vacation. So there's lots of things that you can do to stretch out your teacher salary and take advantage of that time.
Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show. If a teacher wants to get in contact with you, ask you more about your story, how could they connect with you?
Well, I don't have a blog or a podcast of my own, but I'm fairly active in the personal finance community online. So they can reach out directly to me. The email address that I use for that is FITeacher50. So that's FITeacher50 @gmail.com. And they're welcome to reach out to me. Not an expert, just a hobbyist that spent a lot of time thinking and working through these problems. So if there's anyone out there that I can help, I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. He's active in Facebook groups like Choose FI as well, but you can also reach out to him at that email address. And if you'd like to find that email address, you can go to teachermoneyshow.com/podcast. I'll have the links to that that email address there on our show notes page, as well as the show notes for all the episodes for this show. And once again, you'll also be able to find the link directly to that page in the show notes on your actual podcast player. It's been a ton of fun having you, Eric, and I really appreciate your time today.
Happy to be there. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was a great conversation. I love how Eric was able to retire early after starting late. 20 years doesn't sound like a short time, but when it comes to retirement, right, we're talking about versus a 30, 40-year time period. 20 years is quite a good turnaround, especially considering that he had a start from debt. So congratulations, Eric, on that. Now it's time to talk about the key takeaways or the cliff notes of this episode. And I know that you probably hate it when your students use cliff notes, but I bet you love them when you're trying to figure out stuff in a book quickly. So here's the cliff notes version of my interview with Eric. These cliff notes are brought to you by Fidelity. Once again, they're not a sponsor, but they are a service that I use. I recommend them because they are great. So if you want the referral link so you can start your own account with Fidelity, you can go to teachermoneyshow.com/podcast and you'll be able to find the referral link there. Or if you go to the description of the show notes, you can find the link directly to the show notes for this page there. And once again, Fidelity is low fee. It's got a good interface. And it's where I have my own Roth IRA. And that's what Eric talked about. So the first clip note is that Eric uses a Roth IRA because the tax advantages you get from putting money into a tax sheltered account, such as a traditional IRA or a traditional 403b or a traditional 457, might not be worth it on your lower teacher salary. It's really important to make all of your choices intentionally, not saying, well, everyone says put your money in a 457 or everyone says put your money in a 403b or whatever it is. Don't follow what everyone says, follow what's best for you. And if you need help figuring out what's best for you, that's what a financial coach is for. So if you would like to have financial coaching services, you can reach out to me at Shaun, SHAUN, at teachermoneyshow.com, or you can go to teachermoneyshow.com/coaching and you can reach out to me there. And we can work through what your decision should be, whether that's coming on the podcast to talk about it or working one-on-one. The next clip note is having FU money. I don't like this term as much just because I don't like to be vulgar. That's just my personality. But the idea of saying, I won't do this because I think it's bad for me, for my students, and you can't make me because you have money on hand is super powerful. So it's super important that you build up your nest egg so that way you don't have that financial stress and you have that financial confidence to be able to do what you want to do. The next clip note is to not rely on the legislature to support you. I know that this is maybe not applicable in every state, but how often can we really rely on the legislature? Not so much. People very rarely vote to raise taxes to be able to pay teachers more. People very rarely want to vote to increase the cost of living adjustments for pensions just because it means more money out of their pockets. That is why I have this podcast, is to teach teachers how to handle your money that you have, not pine over money you don't have. And unfortunately, we have very little control over the money we don't have, the raises and salaries. Of course, I invite you to advocate for those things. Just don't count on them. Make sure you have your own money, your own accounts on hand to be able to be ready to retire yourself, regardless of your pension. Now, if you have to have a pension to retire, that's not bad. I'm just saying that having other options, so that way you're not only relying on that, maybe not adjusting enough pension for the rest of your life. The next cliff note is to retire to something. When you have a goal after you retire, when you have a plan, when you have a job or a service or something that you're doing after you've retired, that's going to fire you up to get there because you're excited about it, and it's going to support you, your social needs, your industrious needs as a human being after you have retired. If you're going to sit there and watch Jeopardy, you're not going to last long in retirement. It's just not going to be a fulfilling life for you. So please retire to something. And if you get paid to do it, all the better. That just adds some extra gravy to your retirement bundle. The next cliff note is to remember to educate yourself. As an educator, you know all about learning. So don't do nothing in your learning. You need to understand these financial principles, which if you're listening to this show, I assume that's what you're doing. But don't just listen to one podcast. Listen to more than one podcast. Read some books. Try and understand the deeper meanings of these important financial things. So that way, when you are making a decision, as we were talking about, making those decisions that work best for you, you are making the right decision because you know what they are. And you use these other resources as advice to help you as you are making that decision, following those suggestions when they fit you and ignoring them when they don't. And the last clip note is to use your flexible schedule to experiment. Use that summer break to say, is this a good business idea? Use that summer break to say, would I want to live here? Use that summer break to, just work extra hard to pay down debt. Whatever it is that you need right now, that summer break is prime time to be able to really just experiment with the life that you want or build up the nest egg to get there. So those are my key takeaways with my interview with Eric. It was great having him, hearing a teacher who has made it even a bit later in life than other teachers who might be starting at the beginning, and realize that if you are not within 20 years away from retirement, if you're maybe a bit closer, that doesn't mean that you stop and say, well, there's no point. I can't get where Eric is, so I shouldn't even try. Every dollar you have, every cent that you put away towards your retirement is going to make your retirement that much more enjoyable, that much better, as you are having that flexibility and that freedom you get when you retire by having more on hand instead of just relying on that pension, which may or may not adjust. So keep striving for that goal, keep pushing for it, because even if you're not able to retire on that money, if you get 5 years out from retirement and you just can't do it anymore, and you have something set aside, you can use it as a bridge to get to something else. So that way you can continue to support yourself as you're trying to figure out your next moves. Don't be that person across the hall that is stuck and is tearing down their students as they are not enjoying, they don't have that passion anymore for teaching. You are amazing teachers. You deserve to be rich. And remember, as a teacher, you're already rich. Your wallet just needs to catch up. Are you worried you won't have enough money to retire? Or maybe you just don't know how you're going to get out of all of this debt. Whatever your situation is, I can help you. Go to teachermoneyshow.com/guest and fill out the form there. And you can come on the show for free coaching, or we can meet one-on-one to discuss your needs. I look forward to talking to you.